In the world of global pop stardom, noise is everything. Chart numbers, flashing cameras, sold-out stadiums, headlines that move faster than the truth. For years, Jungkook of BTS lived at the center of that noise, praised, analyzed, admired, and endlessly watched. Yet, when people speak about Jungkook today, especially in 2025, one word surfaces repeatedly across media coverage and fan discussions alike. Quiet, not absence, not disappearance, but a deliberate, meaningful quiet. This article explores the real, documented periods of silence in Jungkook's life. Years when he spoke less, appeared less, and chose reflection over spectacle. These were not gaps in his career. They were formative years, shaping the artist and person who re-emerged stronger, calmer, and more self-assured. This is not a story of scandal. This is not a story of collapse. This is the story of how quiet years can redefine a global icon. Jungkook was only 13 years old when his life changed forever. Born and raised in Busan, South Korea, he grew up in a close-knit family environment. He was young, playful, and known more for his natural talent than any grand ambition. Music came instinctively to him, but fame was not something he chased. That changed when he passed auditions and moved to Seoul, a teen age when most children are protected by routine and familiarity. Jungkook found himself alone in a new city, living as a trainee. He has spoken openly, in multiple BTS documentaries and interviews, about how isolating that period felt. He did not talk much, he observed, he practiced. Other trainees were older, more confident, more outspoken. Jungkook, instead, stayed quiet. That early silence was not weakness, it was adaptation. He learned by watching, absorbing criticism, and working relentlessly behind closed doors. Those years away from home would later define his emotional resilience. When BTS debuted in 2013, Jungkook was still a teenager. From the outside, success looked immediate. But internally, the pressure was immense. He was labeled the Golden Magne, a title meant as praise, but one that carried expectations far heavier than his age. He was expected to sing flawlessly, dance, powerfully learn, fast improve, constantly represent perfection in interviews. Jungkook has admitted he often felt he needed to grow up faster than he was ready to. While other members spoke confidently in interviews, Jungkook frequently stayed silent, smiling politely, answering briefly. Media outlets often described him as shy or reserved, but those close to him understood that he was processing pressure internally. Silence became his coping mechanism. Between 2016 and 2019, BTS's global rise was unprecedented. World tours, Billboard rankings, international awards, meetings with world leaders for Jungkook. This meant growing up under a global microscope. Every performance was dissected, every expression analyzed, every moment replayed. Despite being one of the most popular members, Jungkook rarely sought attention off stage. He avoided unnecessary interviews, spoke carefully, and chose privacy over exposure whenever possible. Journalists began noticing a pattern. Jungkook was loud on stage, but quiet everywhere else. This contrast defined him. As his public speaking decreased, Jungkook's artistic expression increased. He poured emotion into vocal delivery, dance, intensity, live performances, song interpretation. Music became his language. In BTS documentaries, fellow members have mentioned that Jungkook communicates best through action rather than speech. This was evident during emotionally demanding periods, when he would retreat inward but continue performing at the highest level. Silence did not mean disengagement. It meant focus, and carefully worded public conversations. Jungkook has acknowledged moments of self-doubt. He never dramatized it. He never sensationalized it. He simply admitted that. He questioned himself. He worried about meeting expectations. He wanted to do better. These statements, shared in official content, resonated deeply with fans. Not because they suggested struggle, but because they showed honesty. The quiet years were also years of internal questioning. As BTS entered their group hiatus era and members began individual paths, Jungkook again chose restraint. While others explored variety shows, public collaborations, or frequent media appearances, Jungkook remained selective. When he did appear, it was intentional. This choice was widely discussed by media in neutral, factual tones. Jungkook preferred working privately. Jungkook focused on music and training. Jungkook avoided unnecessary exposure. Silence, once again, was strategic. Jungkook's military enlistment marked the most silent chapter of his life. During this time, he had minimal public presence, no promotional activities, no interviews, no social media engagement, unlike dramatic farewells often seen in celebrity enlistments. Jungkook's departure was calm and understated. Media reports described him as disciplined and focused. Fans respected the boundary. For the first time since childhood, Jungkook lived without performance schedules or global expectations. It was a true pause. When Jungkook completed his service in 2025, the industry expected a dramatic comeback. What they received instead was patience, and immediate album announcement, and grand press conference, and aggressive promotion. Instead, Jungkook re-entered public life slowly, appearing composed, mature, and grounded. Journalists noted the change, more measured. Speech, calm demeanor, clear boundaries. This was not the silence of uncertainty. This was the silence of confidence. By mid to late 2025, Jungkook's influence surged again. Without excessive appearances, streaming numbers climbed, search rankings soared, media attention intensified. Yet Jungkook remained selective. This proved something critical. He no longer needed noise to command attention. The quiet years had reshaped his relationship with fame. Looking back, Jungkook's quiet years reveal a pattern: silence. During growth, distance, during pressure, reflection, during transition. These were not empty periods. They were preparation. In a world that demands constant visibility, Jungkook chose depth. One of the most striking changes observed in Jungkook after his military service was not something he announced. It was something people noticed. There was no press statement about personal growth, no interview declaring transformation. Instead, journalists, producers, and fans independently described the same thing. Jungkook appeared more centered. His posture, speech rhythm, and choice of words suggested someone who no longer felt the need to explain himself. This maturity was not performative. It was quiet and consistent. Chapter 12. A different kind of before. Jungkook's confidence lived mostly on stage. After 2025, it extended beyond performance and public appearances. He spoke slowly, thoughtfully, and with intention. He paused before answering questions. He smiled less for effect and more out of sincerity. This shift was widely noted in media coverage, framed not as a change in personality, but as evolution. In an industry that rewards constant exposure, Jungkook did something unexpected. He chose restraint. Instead of saturating the market with appearances, he limited interviews, avoided overexposure, focused on quality over frequency. Industry analysts pointed out that this strategy increased, not decreased, public interest. Silence became part of the narrative. Silence is often misunderstood as absence. In Jungkook's case, it was control. His limited appearances created anticipation. Every small update became meaningful. Every performance felt intentional. This approach aligned with how global artists outside K-pop manage longevity, suggesting Jungkook was thinking long-term. Post-2025 coverage of Jungkook showed a noticeable tonal shift. Rather than framing him as the youngest member, journalists increasingly referred to him as a global solo artist, a cultural figure, a benchmark for post-military idol transitions. This change reflected how Jungkook himself engaged with the press: calm, respectful, but firm in boundaries. When Jungkook did speak publicly, it mattered. He avoided filler statements. His words were brief but sincere, often centered on gratitude, work ethic, and the future. This selective communication strengthened his credibility. Fans listened more closely because he spoke less. ARMY noticed the change before headlines did. Across fan communities, discussions focused on Jungkook's calmer energy, his grounded presence, his deliberate pacing. Importantly, these observations were framed with respect, not concern. Fans recognized growth, not distance. One recurring theme in 2025 media commentary was Jungkook's transition from idol to artist. This did not mean abandoning idol identity, but expanding beyond it. His approach to music, performance, and public life suggested autonomy and self-definition. Time is often overlooked in celebrity narratives. For Jungkook, time away from constant visibility allowed. Reflection skill, refinement, emotional recalibration, these elements cannot be rushed. His quiet years provided exactly that. Unlike many artists who return with dramatic reinventions, Jungkook did not rebrand. There was no drastic image shift, no forced concept. Instead, he returned as the same Jungkook, only clearer. That authenticity resonated globally. Music industry professionals responded positively. Producers and collaborators described Jungkook as focused, detail-oriented, highly disciplined. These descriptions matched his public demeanor, reinforcing consistency between image and reality. Despite fewer appearances, Jungkook remained globally relevant. Search rankings, streaming metrics, and brand interest all confirmed one thing: visibility does not equal impact. His influence endured because it was rooted in substance. For Jungkook, success post-2025 appeared less about domination and more about sustainability. He did not chase headlines. Headlines followed him. This reframing of success marked a turning point in his career philosophy. One of the most important lessons from Jungkook's quiet years was boundary setting. He learned when to appear, when to step back, when silence was healthier than explanation. These boundaries protected both his art and personal well-being. Without public drama and fast-moving pop culture, Jungkook demonstrated the power of unhurried growth. He did not race against trends. He allowed growth to unfold naturally. This patience became part of his appeal. Jungkook never positioned himself as a role model, yet his choices, especially choosing quiet over chaos, spoke louder than statements. Young artists and fans alike saw an example of how to navigate fame without losing oneself. Looking back, it becomes clear that Jungkook's quiet years were not pauses. They were foundations. Everything that followed, confidence, control, clarity, was built during moments unseen by the public. In 2025, Jungkook reached a rare position in entertainment. He no longer needed to explain his choices. His work spoke. His presence spoke. His silence spoke. While future projects remain carefully managed, one thing is evident: whatever Jungkook does next will arrive when it is ready, not when it is demanded. That patience is his greatest strength. Jungkook's story is not about disappearing. It is about understanding when to step back so growth can happen. The quiet years did not take anything from him. They gave him direction. In a world obsessed with noise, Jungkook proved that silence, when chosen, can be the loudest statement of all. The global entertainment industry thrives on speed. Trends rise and fall in weeks. Artists are expected to respond instantly to news, to criticism, to demand. Jungkook's quiet years stood in direct contrast to this system. By choosing stillness, he challenged the assumption that relevance must be constantly maintained through visibility. His career demonstrated that absence, when intentional, can deepen impact rather than dilute it. Silence often invites speculation, but Jungkook resisted clarifying every assumption. Rather than addressing every narrative, he allowed time and work to speak. This refusal to over-explain preserved authenticity and prevented unnecessary cycles of reaction. Media analysts noted that Jungkook's restraint minimized controversy while maintaining public trust. Quiet does not mean inactive. Behind the scenes, Jungkook's routine remained rigorous. Training, vocal practice, physical conditioning, and creative development continued without interruption. Industry insiders consistently described him as disciplined and meticulous, qualities developed during years of working silently without external validation. Many artists announced growth. Jungkook demonstrated it. There was no narrative campaign built around self-discovery. Instead, audiences noticed subtle changes in posture, pacing, and expression. Growth was visible because it was lived, not marketed. In earlier years, Jungkook was often compared to peers, to seniors, to global pop figures. After 2025, comparisons became less frequent, not because competition disappeared, but because Jungkook's trajectory became singular. He was no longer chasing benchmarks. He was setting his own rhythm. Jungkook's approach to music creation became increasingly private. Rather than previewing unfinished work or teasing concepts prematurely, he kept development stages internal. This allowed experimentation without external pressure, a luxury rarely afforded to artists of his stature. Trust became central to Jungkook's post-Quiet Years era. He trusted his team to manage communication. He trusted fans to wait. He trusted himself to move at his own pace. This trust replaced urgency with stability. Fans, too, evolved alongside him. ARMY gradually adjusted expectations, valuing quality over quantity. Instead of demanding constant updates, many embraced the idea that Jungkook's silence meant preparation, not withdrawal. This mutual understanding strengthened the artist-fan relationship. Every appearance Jungkook made post-2025 carried weight. A single performance generated more discussion than multiple appearances once did. This shift reflected a broader cultural change, audiences responding more to meaning than frequency. Momentum is powerful, but fleeting. Longevity requires patience. Jungkook's Quiet Years demonstrated a deliberate choice to prioritize career endurance over short-term saturation. Industry experts recognize this as a hallmark of artists aiming for decades-long relevance. Notably, Jungkook avoided framing his quiet years as hardship. He did not present silence as suffering, nor return with dramatic declarations of survival. This refusal to sensationalize personal experience preserved dignity and authenticity. In an era where controversy often fuels attention, Jungkook's story lacked dramatic conflict. This absence became its own statement. Growth does not require collapse. His career progression demonstrated stability as a form of strength. Traditionally, comebacks involve reinvention, shock, or spectacle. Jungkook's return defied this pattern. It was gradual, measured, and rooted in continuity rather than disruption. This redefinition influenced how post-military returns were discussed industry-wide. Jungkook did not announce authority. He embodied it. Through calm demeanor and consistent quality, he asserted control over his narrative without confrontation or declaration. This quiet authority marked a significant evolution in his public identity. Waiting is rarely celebrated in pop culture, yet Jungkook demonstrated that waiting, strategic, intentional waiting, can be transformative. He allowed anticipation to build naturally, without manipulation. By 2025, Jungkook became effectively unrushable. Deadlines no longer dictated his pace. Expectations no longer forced immediate response. This freedom represented the culmination of years of quiet discipline. While many artists shift identities across eras, Jungkook's core remained consistent. What changed was clarity, not character. Consistency, sustained through silence, became part of his artistic identity. Experience refined Jungkook's instincts. Years of observation, often silent, allowed him to understand industry patterns deeply. This understanding informed smarter decisions and reduced reactive behavior. Without positioning himself as a leader, Jungkook influenced industry norms. Younger artists referenced his pacing and discretion as aspirational. His career choices quietly reshaped expectations. Silence also functioned as protection. By limiting exposure, Jungkook reduced misinterpretation, overanalysis, and narrative distortion. This self-protection ensured longevity without isolation. Rather than chasing constant peaks, Jungkook focused on building a stable foundation. This approach reduced volatility and allowed creative freedom independent of trends. Despite fewer public interactions, Jungkook did not disconnect from audiences. Connection shifted form, from constant communication to meaningful presence. This evolution deepened engagement. The core of Jungkook's quiet years was self-trust, trusting instinct over noise, trusting process over pressure, trusting timing over demand. Jungkook rarely announced plans. Instead, he allowed actions to reveal direction. This approach preserved flexibility and prevented expectation traps. As Jungkook slowed, the industry adjusted. Schedules accommodated his pace. Coverage adapted to his restraint. This reversal highlighted his influence. Legacy is often associated with milestones. Jungkook's legacy began forming not through spectacle, but through consistency, discipline, and restraint. Urgency once defined Jungkook's early years. By 2025, it no longer did. He moved with intention, not pressure. Jungkook's career trajectory offered a model for sustainable fame, one that values balance, pacing, and internal alignment. This model challenges industry norms. Looking back, the quiet years were not gaps. They were chapters, necessary, formative, and defining. Each moment of silence contributed to clarity. Jungkook's journey proves that greatness does not always announce itself. Sometimes, it develops quietly, away from headlines, away from noise, and when it returns, it does not need to shout. It simply stands. By this stage in his career, Jungkook's silence could no longer be interpreted as hesitation. It was intent. Each pause, each absence, each delay reflected conscious decision-making. Silence was no longer reactive, it was chosen. This distinction marked the final shift from instinctive restraint to deliberate authorship of his own narrative. Earlier in his career, like many young artists, Jungkook sought improvement through feedback and approval. After the quiet years, that need softened, not because criticism no longer mattered, but because his sense of self became internal. Validation moved inward, grounded in process rather than applause. Jungkook reached a point where explanations felt unnecessary. Experience had already shaped him. Outcomes already spoke. This allowed him to disengage from cycles of clarification and defense, preserving energy for creation instead. Time was no longer an enemy to outrun. Deadlines became flexible, schedules became negotiable. This new relationship with time allowed deeper preparation, longer refinement, and healthier pacing, rare. Privileges in pop culture, silence, in Jungkook's case, also reflected respect. Respect for the audience's intelligence, the work's integrity, the moment's readiness. He did not oversell or overexplain. He trusted reception. Jungkook's presence no longer demanded attention. It commanded it. This shift separated him from trends built on constant stimulation. His relevance became stable, not spiked. Every decision carried weight precisely because there were fewer of them. This economy of choice heightened impact. Nothing felt disposable. Nothing felt rushed. Earlier years were defined by output. Later years were defined by purpose. Jungkook's quiet years marked the transition between the two, where doing less created more meaning. Jungkook no longer performed offstage. There was no exaggerated persona, no manufactured accessibility. What audiences saw was aligned with who he was. This alignment reduced exhaustion and strengthened authenticity. His career began to breathe. Periods of activity were balanced by periods of rest. This rhythm mirrored longevity models seen in global creative industries beyond pop music. Silence became a creative incubator. Ideas matured without interruption. Mistakes happened privately. Growth unfolded without pressure. This incubation strengthened output when it finally surfaced. Public expectation did not disappear, but it no longer dictated direction. Jungkook acknowledged his audience without surrendering autonomy. This balance preserved trust on both sides. Speed once defined success. Depth replaced it. Jungkook's quiet years demonstrated how slowing down can deepen cultural impact rather than weaken it. Jungkook's trajectory resonated beyond K-pop. Western media, industry analysts, and creatives recognized familiar patterns seen in long-lasting artists across genres, those who survived by pacing themselves. Perhaps the most telling change was the absence of fear. Fear of missing out. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of silence. The quiet years had dissolved these anxieties. Stillness became visible confidence, not loud, not confrontational, but unshakable. Legacy is often built on achievements. Jungkook's legacy also includes how he waited patiently, intentionally, and without resentment. That approach shaped how his story will be remembered. Growth continued even when no one was watching. This independence marked the final stage of artistic maturity. Looking back, the quiet years function as a map. They show where Jungkook paused, reflected, adjusted, and advanced, not randomly, but deliberately. Jungkook's journey is not defined by what he withheld, but by what he protected: time, focused, identity, and choosing silence when noise was easier. He shaped a career grounded in longevity rather than urgency. And in the end, the quiet years did not take anything away. They gave him everything he needed to stand where he is now, complete, grounded, and unmistakably present. By the final stage of his journey, silence was no longer merely a strategy for Jungkook. It became a language, a way of communicating boundaries, intent, and direction without confrontation. Those who followed closely learned to read that language, not as absence but as meaning. In creative industries, sharing is often encouraged. Jungkook learned the value of withholding, not withholding out of fear, but out of respect for process. Ideas were allowed to exist privately before being released into public interpretation. One of the most misunderstood aspects of Jungkook's quiet years was distance. Distance did not mean detachment. He remained connected to his craft, his team, and his audience, but no longer tethered to constant visibility. This distinction preserved intimacy without exhaustion. Earlier in his career, Jungkook was almost always available. By maturity, he no longer was. This was not withdrawal, it was sustainability. Availability became intentional, not assumed. Control in entertainment is often negotiated through patience and restraint. Jungkook reclaimed it quietly. Creative timelines, public exposure, and professional pacing increasingly aligned with his own rhythm rather than industry urgency. Short-term gains rarely define long careers. Jungkook's quiet years reflected long-view thinking, prioritizing endurance over immediacy. This perspective placed him among artists who plan not just albums, but decades. The modern media environment rewards constant output. Jungkook's stillness acted as a counter-response, cutting through oversaturation by refusing to compete with it. Ironically, this restraint made his presence more visible. Much of Jungkook's growth happened where cameras were absent: training rooms, practice spaces, silent rehearsals. These unseen hours formed the backbone of his public excellence, reinforcing that mastery is built away from applause. Audiences adapted. Rather than demanding immediacy, many learned to wait, recognizing that patience often precedes quality. This mutual adjustment reshaped the artist-fan dynamic into something more sustainable. Silence no longer carried fear. Fear of irrelevance. Fear of being replaced. Jungkook's career proved that presence anchored in substance does not vanish easily. Earlier eras involved experimentation. Later years brought stability. Jungkook no longer searched for identity. It was established, grounded, and flexible enough to evolve without fracture. Reactions are immediate. Responses are considered. Jungkook's quiet years marked the transition from reacting to circumstances to responding with intention, a hallmark of maturity. Growth ceased to be something to showed. It simply happened. This private evolution strengthened authenticity and reduced the need for narrative framing. Acceptance played a key role. Acceptance of limitations. Acceptance of time. Acceptance that not everything requires explanation. This acceptance stabilized his public and private life. Silence leaves traces. In Jungkook's case, it left an archival footprint. Moments where restraint shaped perception more powerfully than publicity. Future retrospectives will identify these gaps as turning points. Burnout defines many public figures. Jungkook's pacing resisted it. Through balance and restraint, his career maintained momentum without collapse, a rare outcome in pop culture. Hiding avoids, resting restores. Jungkook's quiet years were rooted in restoration, not avoidance, a distinction evident in his renewed clarity. Visibility was no longer imposed. Jungkook chose how and when to be seen. This autonomy represented the final reclaiming of narrative power. Without instruction or declaration, Jungkook's journey became instructive. Artists, fans, and observers learned from his example how silence can coexist with relevance.